seen what happens when you take the ball out of a player's hands who needs the spotlight to survive? That's what it's like when you stop playing a narcissist game. See, in basketball, there are players who grind in the dark, and then there are players who only show up when the crowd is watching. Narcissists, they're the second kind. They feed off your attention, your reaction, your energy. You stop giving them match and they unravel. This talk isn't about revenge. This is about reclaiming your control. It's about mental toughness. The same way I approach the game, disciplined, focused, with no wasted movement. That's how you need to move when dealing with manipulation. No reaction is your power. Silence is your defense. Distance is your strategy. When you stop playing their game, they lose their script. And when the script is gone, so is the control. That's when the real shift begins. You stop being a pawn and you start becoming the master of your space. This isn't about ego, it's about elevation. You want to know what greatness looks like off the court? It's when you decide you're done being played. Let's get into it. They escalate manipulation tactics to regain control. That's their first instinct when you stop playing their game. You see, a narcissist doesn't respond to boundaries like a healthy person would. They don't respect space, silence, or independence. To them, distance equals threat. Because when you pull away, they lose the attention, the power, and the emotional leverage they've built their control on. So when you stop reacting, they don't disappear. They adapt, but not in a way that's constructive or mature. They switch masks, they sharpen tactics. They come back louder, smoother, more calculated. First, they'll likely turn up the charm, the same charm that hooked you in the beginning. They'll become everything you once needed them to be: sweet, thoughtful, attentive. They'll use nostalgia like a weapon, reminding you of the good moments, the laughter, the connection. They're hoping you'll forget why you pulled away in the first place. That's the love bomb in round two. But this time, it's not about genuine emotion. It's a strategy. It's a way to reel you back in under the illusion that things have changed. And if that doesn't work, they shift gears fast. The charm fades and the pressure begins, the guilt tripping. After everything I did for you, I guess you never cared. They try to paint you as cold, ungrateful, selfish. Their words are meant to sting, to make you doubt yourself, to make you question if you're the one in the wrong. Because if they can make you feel guilty, they can manipulate you back into engagement. They don't care about resolution, they care about reattachment. And guilt is just another tool in the toolbox. If gaslighting fails, they might up the stakes. Now we're talking about subtle threats, not always physical, sometimes emotional, social, or financial. They might hint at taking away something you value, threatening to expose secrets, withdraw support, or ruin your reputation. Is not always direct, it's often veiled, a comment here, a joke there, but the message is clear: if you don't play their game, there will be consequences. This is intimidation disguised as conversation. It's control wrapped in manipulation. They might even start targeting people around you, friends, family, coworkers, spreading rumors, planting doubts, making you look like the unstable one. They'll try to isolate you again because isolation makes you dependent. If no one believes your side, it becomes harder to stand your ground. They need to be the victim in every story they tell, and they'll twist narratives until they're the one who was mistreated, abandoned, misunderstood. That way, when you try to explain the truth, it already sounds like a lie to those who've been fed their version first. In some cases, they'll even try to mimic your growth. If you start healing, they'll pretend to be healing too. If you go silent, they'll talk about working on themselves. It's a tactic to pull you back in, to make you second guess the distance you've created. They'll act like they finally get it, that they're changing, that they're better. But the moment you engage again, the mask drops and the cycle restarts. Because the change wasn't real, it was bait. And if all of that fails, if you truly stand your ground, they might go into full narcissistic rage. Not always loud, Sometimes it's passive aggressive, silent treatment, cold and calculated. Other times it's explosive, irrational, meant to scare you back into compliance. They hate losing control, and your refusal to react is the ultimate insult to their ego. Rage becomes their last desperate attempt to shake you, to get you emotional, to make you feel unsafe. Because if you feel shaken, they still have a shot at pulling you back in. But here's the thing, this escalation isn't about love or pain or even you. It's about power. It's about the loss of control. When you stop playing the game, you take the power away. And when power slips through their fingers, they don't reflect, they react. They don't look inward, they lash outward. They'll cycle through every tactic they know. Charm, guilt, confusion, intimidation, imitation, rage, all in a desperate attempt to make you play again. Because to them, the game is everything. It's not about connection. It's about domination. And without your participation, the entire illusion collapses. They play the victim, the guilt, trip you back in. The moment you set boundaries, go silent, or walk away, a narcissist flips the script. Suddenly, they become the wounded one, the one who's been wronged, misunderstood, abandoned. It's a calculated move, not an emotional breakdown. It's all about perception, how they can twist your strength into cruelty, your silence into selfishness, your independence into betrayal. Because when they paint themselves as the victim, they regain control of the narrative, and they hope to regain control of you. This tactic is especially powerful because it hits the most empathetic parts of you. You might second guess your actions, wonder if you were too harsh, start feeling bad for the very person who created the chaos. That's exactly what they want. They want your guilt to do the work that their manipulation no longer can. Narcissists understand human emotion, they just don't feel it the same way. But they'll study yours and use it against you. If they know you're someone who hates hurting others, they'll lean into that. They'll talk about how devastated they are, how much pain they're in, how lost they feel without you. You might hear them say things like, I can't believe you would give up on us after everything we've been through, or I guess I never meant anything to you. These phrases aren't admissions of hurt. They're emotional traps. Because the moment you respond to defend yourself or to reassure them, the hook is back in. You've stepped back into the role they need you to play. Now they can resume control. Now they can steer the situation. Your guilt becomes their power. And if direct guilt tripping doesn't work, they'll expand the stage. They'll start telling others, friends, family, mutual connections, how broken they are, how cold you've become, how they did everything they could to save the relationship, the friendship, the bond. The goal is to recruit sympathy from the outside, which then creates pressure on you from people who don't see the full story. It becomes a strategic performance. To you, they were toxic. To the world, they're a victim. And when those people start asking you questions, start encouraging you to be more compassionate, to forgive, to hear them out, it becomes even harder to stand your ground. The narcissist thrives in that gap between public perception and private reality. That's where they operate best, when they can hide their manipulation behind a carefully curated image of pain and heartbreak. They'll share vague, sad posts. They'll act lost in public, defeated. They might even pretend they're going through a personal transformation, not because they actually are, but because it adds credibility to the victim act. It's part of the bait. They want you to believe they're finally broken enough to change, that now, maybe, they'll finally see things clearly, that maybe you leaving woke them up. But none of it is rooted in real accountability. It's rooted in the desperation to pull you back in. Another layer of the victim act is turning the focus away from the truth and onto their feelings. Instead of discussing what they did, they want to talk about how they feel. They'll cry, get emotional, reminisce. They'll center the conversation around their pain so you forget your own. They'll make it seem like their suffering is the real issue, not the lies, not the disrespect, not the control, just their sadness. And if you're not careful, you start managing their emotions again, you start nurturing them again, and slowly the dynamic resets. They may even go as far as using your kindness against you, saying things like, I knew you didn't mean to hurt me, or you've always had such a big heart. These comments aren't compliments. They're manipulation wrapped in flattery. They're trying to pull you back into the role of caretaker, of healer. Because if they can convince you that you're the one with emotional strength, they can shift the responsibility of repair onto you. Now it's your job to fix things, your job to forgive, your job to help them heal from the very pain they caused. If you resist all this, they'll escalate the act. They'll spiral deeper into self-pity, maybe even hint at self-harm, depression, or a complete breakdown, not because they're seeking help, but because they're seeking control. They want you scared enough to stay, worried enough to reach out, concerned enough to break your boundary. Because as long as they can keep you feeling guilty, they never have to feel powerless. As long as they're the victim, they never have to take responsibility. As long as you're playing the role of the rescue, they don't have to grow. They spread false narratives to damage your image. When a narcissist loses control over you, they don't just let go and move on. They rewrite the story in a way that protects their ego and punishes your independence. To them, reputation is everything. But it's not about authenticity. It's about dominance. If they can't control how you think, they'll try to control how others think about you. It's not just personal, it's strategic. They want to make sure that even if they've lost access to you, they still have influence over your environment. It starts subtly. A few comments here and there. They'll speak to mutual friends, co-workers, or family in a way that sounds concerned, even loving. I don't know what happened. They just changed. I tried everything, but they pushed me away. I think they're struggling with something, but they won't let me in. These aren't accusations. They're seed planting. Just enough to make people question. Just enough to make people see them as the reasonable one, the one who cared, the one who got hurt. That's how they build credibility for the bigger lies that follow. Once they've laid the groundwork, they go deeper. Now, it's not just that you changed, it's that you were unstable, difficult, maybe even abusive. They'll twist your reactions into evidence. Your silence becomes emotional coldness. Your boundaries become cruelty. Your refusal to re-engage becomes proof that you never cared. And the people around you who weren't there for the manipulation start to believe it. Because the narcissist is convincing. They don't just tell lies, they perform them with emotion, with detail, with just enough truth to make the fiction sound real. This tactic is powerful because it isolates you. It turns allies into skeptics. It makes you question your own story, your own decisions. It puts you on the defensive, always trying to clarify, to correct the record, to prove your side. But the more you try to explain, the more it looks like you're overreacting. That's how they trap you. They create a narrative so emotionally charged that any attempt to refute it feels like you're validating it. They weaponize perception, and perception becomes the new reality in the eyes of those around you. They'll even tailor different versions of the story to different audiences. To one person, you were too needy. To another, you were too distant. To someone else, you were jealous, controlling, irrational. They shape-shift the narrative based on who they're talking to and what that person's values are. Because it's not about telling the truth. It's about telling the story that wins. The one that makes them look like the hero, the victim, or both. Whatever protects their image and damages yours. In many cases, they'll also use social media as a stage. They might post cryptic quotes about betrayal, loss, or fake people. They might share pictures that imply they're thriving, moving on, healed, while you're stuck, bitter, and invisible. These posts aren't for self-expression, they're bait. Bait for attention, bait for sympathy, bait for control. They want people to ask questions, to reach out, to take sides. And often they want you to see it because narcissists need you to know that they're winning the game of perception, even if they lost access to your life. If you try to defend yourself publicly, they'll flip it. Now you're attacking them, dragging things out, unable to let go. They'll use your defense against you, further validating their story. The narcissist plays the long game. They don't need to be right, they just need to be believed. And they understand that in a world where image is everything, the loudest story often wins. not the truest, the loudest, the most repeated, the one that evokes the most emotion. What makes this tactic especially painful is that it often works. People you once trusted may begin to distance themselves. Some may confront you with confusion, others may silently fade away. And as your circle shrinks, the narcissist feels more powerful. Not because they've grown, but because they've managed to shrink your world. That's what they want, to isolate you emotionally, socially, and mentally. So even if you've escaped their control directly, you still feel the weight of their influence. They want to be out of your life. They want to control the way people remember you. They want to make sure the story ends on their terms with their version as the truth. That's why they spread lies. That's why they build false narratives. Because in their mind, losing control isn't the end. It's just the start of a new manipulation. One where you don't even have to be present for them to keep playing the game. And they try to trigger you to regain emotional control. Narcissists aren't just obsessed with power, they're addicted to the reaction. The moment you stop giving them that reaction, you become a threat to their sense of superiority. Your silence, your calm, your indifference is not just rejection to them, it's humiliation. And they can't tolerate that. So what do? They go back to what's always worked for them, pushing your emotional buttons. If they can get you angry, defensive, upset, or even confused, they feel back in control. Because once they've pulled you out of your peace, they've pulled you back into their chaos. It starts with subtle provocations, a snide comment, a passive-aggressive jab, a sarcastic remark designed to sting just enough to tempt you to respond. Maybe it's a text that seems innocent on the surface but carries a heavy emotional weight. Maybe it's a sudden appearance in places you frequent, acting like it's all a coincidence. Maybe it's an indirect message through mutual friends, making sure you hear something that was just mentioned in passing. These aren't accidents, they're emotional bait. They want you to bite because if you respond, even with anger, you're still playing the game. They've studied your patterns, they know what gets under your skin, what makes you feel seen, what makes you feel dismissed, so they target those exact areas. If you used to be insecure about being misunderstood, they'll accuse you of being selfish. If you were sensitive to being blamed, they'll frame you as the villain. If you were always the peacemaker, they'll create just enough drama to lure you into trying to fix things again. That's their genius. They don't need to physically control you to manipulate you. They just need to control your emotional responses. When you ignore the first few attempts, they don't retreat, they escalate. They may lash out more openly. They'll start saying things that are meant to cut deep, things they know are rooted in your past pain, your personal wounds. Not because they believe what they're saying, but because they know you might believe it. They'll insult your growth, mock your independence, question your motives. It's not about the truth. It's about destabilization. They want you to doubt yourself because self-doubt leads to hesitation. And hesitation leads to vulnerability. And that's where they slip back in. They'll also flip between aggression and charm. One moment they're attacking your character, the next they're nostalgic, talking about the good times. This hot and cold pattern is not confusion, it's control. They want you to feel emotionally whiplashed because in that confusion, you're more likely to drop your guard. You start wondering if maybe they're not that bad. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe there's still something worth salvaging. That doubt is what they're after because clarity keeps you out of their reach. Confusion brings you closer. Sometimes they use third-party manipulation to trigger you. They might involve mutual friends, post things on social media, or talk about how great their life is without you. Not because they're actually happy, but because they want you to feel like you lost, like you were replaceable, like you missed your chance. That's the kind of emotional warfare narcissists specialize in. It's not about closure. It's not about communication. It's about making you feel enough emotion that you open the door they no longer have access to. They'll even act like they've changed, like they've finally done the work, like they understand now. But the timing gives it away. because it only happens when they feel you've truly pulled away. It's not a reflection of growth. It's a reaction to losing grip. They don't want you healed. They want you reactive. Because when you're reacting, you're easier to guide, easier to manipulate, easier to blame. And if you do respond, even just once, they'll see it as a crack in the wall, a signal that they still matter, that you're still emotionally available, that they can still pull you in with the right move. They often rely on guilt as a trigger too. Phrases like, I guess I never meant anything, or I hope you're happy now, are not statements of sadness. They're weapons of emotional pressure. They want you to feel bad for standing your ground, to feel cold for choosing peace. Because if they can make you feel like the bad guy, they can position themselves as the one who deserves your attention, your explanation, your sympathy. And once you start explaining yourself, you're already walking back into their emotional space. Even your silence is something they try to provoke. They'll say things to get you to break it, to defend yourself, to prove something. Because to a narcissist, silence is not peace, it's a challenge. It's defiance. And they'll do whatever they can to shatter it. Because silence means they can't read you, they can't predict you, they can't control you. And that's what terrifies them the most.